Story 1, the graveyard shift at Stull Gas and Grocery. They told me it was just a local legend, just stories, just rumors. But when the lights started flickering at 3:00 a.m. on my first graveyard shift at Stull Gas and Grocery just a mile down the road from the so-called gateway to hell, I realized legends sometimes wait to welcome you. It was October 1st, 2017 when I got hired to work overnight cashier duty at a lonely gas station just off the highway outside of Stull, Kansas. Not the most glamorous job, but I'd just dropped out of KU and needed anything to get by. The manager, Keith, barely said 10 words to me. Just pointed to the register, handed me a key, and muttered something about don't leave the booth unlocked. Easy enough, I thought. That night was cold and deathly still, the kind of Midwestern quiet that presses against your eardrums. Around 2:45 a.m., the only customer I'd seen in hours was a guy who walked in asking for Pall Malls and left without making a sound. That's when I noticed something strange. He'd left no footprints on the dusty floor, and the security footage showed no one entering. Still, I shook it off. New job jitters, right? But things spiraled fast. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the power went out. The humming of the fluorescent lights died in an instant, replaced by the tick-tick-tick of the emergency clock above the fridge. I fumbled with my phone flashlight when the soda machine across the store started hissing, venting gas like something alive. I froze when I heard dragging sounds coming from the walk-in freezer. My radio crackled, suddenly locked the booth. Keith's voice, urgent, breathless, then static. I sprinted to the booth and slammed the lock into place just as I saw the freezer door slowly creak open and a figure crawl out, barefoot in tattered clothing, eyes hollow and glowing faintly red. I was paralyzed, staring as it limped its way toward the counter and vanished. Just dissolved into thin air. That's when I noticed every product in the store had shifted cans, rearranged cigarettes, misplaced a single red candle sitting in the middle of aisle 3. I later found out that candlelight, specifically red candles, were part of local rituals to summon those buried in the unmarked graves near Stull Church. The gas station built on top of where they said the old church cemetery overflowed. They never told new hires that. I quit the next morning. But sometimes when I drive down that stretch of highway, my radio still crackles to life. Same voice, same words. Lock the booth. Story 2, the haunting at Riverbend Retirement Home. You'd think a job helping old folks couldn't possibly be terrifying. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for when one of them dies and doesn't leave. It was January 2022 when I started my new job as a night shift caregiver at Riverbend Retirement Home just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. The pay was decent, the residents were kind, and the halls were always warm and quiet at night, too quiet, almost artificially so. On my first shift, I was shadowing a nurse named Rhonda. She was blunt, middle-aged, and oddly cautious around room 113. "If you hear the bell ring in there," she said, "ignore it, there's no one inside." I chuckled, assuming it was a joke. But later that night, while Rhonda was napping in the break room and I was doing rounds, the soft chime of the call bell from 113 echoed through the hallway. I remembered her words, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. Empty. The bed was made, the floor clean, the window cracked just slightly to let in mountain air. But then I felt its cold breath against my neck and the unmistakable scent of burnt matches. My stomach dropped. I turned around and for a split second I saw a frail woman with paper-thin skin and hollow cheeks sitting upright in the bed. Her eyes locked on mine and her lips moved slowly. "He's still here." Then she vanished. I stumbled back and slammed the door. Later, Rhonda told me that a man named Mr. Everly had died in that room 3 years ago after setting fire to his mattress. Nobody knew how he'd started the fire. There were no lighters or matches in the room. They found him with burn marks on his face and a candle stub in his hand. Ever since, residents swore they heard him pacing in the hallway, tapping his cane. That week, I started noticing patterns. Lights flickering when I passed 113 wheelchairs rolling on their own. One night, I even heard faint whispering from the vents, my name repeated over and over in a raspy voice. I reported everything, but the staff just gave me tired looks and told me to stop feeding it. Apparently, the more attention you give to room 113, the stronger he gets. But I made a mistake. I wrote everything down in a notebook, every whisper, every shadow, every dream. On my last night, I found that notebook open on the floor in 113, even though I swore I never brought it there. The last page had fresh handwriting, shaky all caps, "You invited me." I quit the next day, still haven't burned the notebook. I'm too afraid it might scream. Story 3, the morgue beneath Mercy Hill Hospital. I wasn't supposed to work in the basement. I was hired for clerical duties at Mercy Hill Hospital in Pittsburgh, answer phones, file charts, help families with paperwork. But on my first day, the supervisor asked me to run some forms down to the morgue. "Just a quick drop-off," he said, like it was no big deal. I didn't argue. New job, new rules. So I took the elevator down to the sub-basement where the air grew noticeably colder and heavier with each floor. The morgue was tucked away behind a security door that beeped open with my temporary badge. Inside, it looked just like the show's metal drawers, tile floors, stainless steel counters. But there was something else, something off. The lights above flickered slowly, rhythmically, like they were breathing. I found the tray labeled "Incoming Reports" and slid my folder in. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a loud clang behind me. One of the drawers had opened slightly. I stood frozen, staring, unsure if it had been an air release or something worse. Then the toe of a body bag slowly pushed its way out. I backed toward the door, but the lights cut out, plunging everything into pitch black. Panic rose fast. I couldn't find the door handle. Then I heard it, a wet shuffle, the squeak of a rubber sole dragging. Something was moving inside. My breath caught when a whisper, soft, almost apologetic, breathed out of the darkness. "Don't leave me here." The lights flashed back on for a moment, just long enough for me to see a figure hunched beside the drawer, dragging itself out with impossibly long arms, its mouth sewn shut with medical sutures, eyes wide and begging. I screamed, ran into a metal tray, and finally stumbled out into the hallway, slamming the morgue door behind me. Security found me minutes later, sitting against the wall, shaking. When I tried to explain, they exchanged a look. One of them, an older guard, leaned in and whispered, "That's the boy they stitched up back in '99. Suicide, slit his mouth open, said he wanted to silence the voices he still whispers through his stitches. They told me never to go down alone again." I stayed on for a week, but every time I rode the elevator, it stopped at the morgue. Doors would open, empty lights flickering. I knew he was waiting for me. On my last day, I found a hospital bracelet in my backpack with my name, today's date, and the word admitted. I never wore one. Story 4. The Bell Tower at St. Dunstan's Academy. If I had known what hid inside that tower, I never would have taken the janitor job. But rent was due, and St. Dunstan's Academy, a centuries-old Catholic boarding school in upstate New York, was hiring. My first day was in late September 2021, just as the leaves turned to blood orange and the wind carried that early death chill. The head custodian, a leathery old man named Walt, barely spoke. He just pointed up toward the bell tower and grunted, "Don't clean past the second landing, it's locked for a reason." I asked why. He just said some kids don't leave even when they're gone. I figured he meant old graffiti or bats, maybe a forgotten attic. But curiosity has a sharp edge. That afternoon, I noticed one of the boys, Tommy, I think, standing at the bottom of the tower staircase, staring upward, mumbling something. I asked what he was doing. He whispered, "They're ringing the bell again. It's not supposed to ring anymore." That night, I stayed late to mop the halls. Around 2 a.m., the air suddenly turned frigid, like someone had opened a meat locker. Then came the sound, a single mournful toll from above. The bell. Except that bell had been decommissioned since 1984 after a student named Marcus threw himself from the top during morning mass. They sealed the upper floors afterward, too many kids sneaking up there trying to talk to Marcus. The priest said it became a place of temptation. I couldn't help myself. I grabbed my ring of keys and climbed the staircase, each step groaning under my weight. When I reached the second landing, the lock on the iron gate had already been cut. No rust, no dust, like it had just been done. I hesitated but stepped through. The tower interior was filled with forgotten relics, cobwebbed prayer books, broken pews, melted candles that hadn't seen flame in decades. As I neared the top, I began to hear sobbing. Soft, male, like a child crying for his mother. I turned the final corner and froze.